The distress signal from Colony 7 cut off mid-scream. Commander Jack Morrison stood frozen in the communications hub of Earth's orbital defense station, watching the data stream die. 300,000 civilians. Gone. The Velcrin Armada had glassed the entire settlement in under 4 minutes. Confirmed kill, the tactical officer whispered, her voice hollow. No survivors detected. Jack's hands gripped the edge of the console until his knuckles went white. Colony 7 wasn't a military target. It was farmers, teachers, children. The Velcrin had ignored every diplomatic channel, every peace offering Earth had extended over the past decade. They'd been testing humanity's patience, pushing boundaries, waiting to see how much abuse the humans would tolerate before they stopped playing nice. "Get me Central Command," Jack said quietly. The holographic display flickered to life. Admiral Helen Carter appeared, her face carved from stone. Behind her, the Emergency Council had already assembled. Every major power on Earth represented in one room. That never happened unless something catastrophic was unfolding. "We saw it," Helen said before Jack could speak. "The whole system saw it." "What are our orders?" Helen glanced at someone off screen. When she looked back, something had changed in her eyes. Something cold and ancient that humanity had spent centuries trying to bury. The council just voted. Unanimous decision. She paused. "We're invoking Protocol Omega." Jack felt his blood turn to ice. Protocol Omega. The contingency plan that every officer knew about but prayed would never be authorized. The one that threw out every rule of engagement, every treaty limitation, every moral constraint that civilized species agreed to follow. "Confirmation code?" Jack asked, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Reaper 77 November. Authorization is live." All restrictions lifted. Across the solar system, military bases received the same message. The sleeping giant was awake. And it was furious. Captain Lisa Hayes commanded the destroyer Vengeance when the orders came through. She read them twice, then looked at her executive officer. "This is really happening," Danny Rodriguez said. He wasn't asking. "Get me a firing solution on every Velcrin ship within range. Don't wait for them to power weapons. If it's theirs and it's moving, I want it dead." The Velcrin had studied human warfare. They knew about the world wars, the nuclear age, the brief but brutal conflicts that had marked humanity's climb to the stars. What they didn't understand was that humans had been holding back, playing by rules they'd imposed on themselves. Being civilized, the Velcrin commander Throck received the first indication something had changed when his fleet's rearguard simply vanished from sensors. Not destroyed in battle. Just gone. Erased. He pulled up the tactical display and felt his 3 hearts skip in unison. Human ships were emerging from every vector, not the patrol cruisers and defensive frigates they usually deployed. These were vessels Throck had never seen before. Massive dreadnoughts that had to have been under construction for decades, hidden in the outer planets, waiting. "Incoming transmission," his communications officer announced. "It's from Earth." A human female appeared on screen. She wore a simple gray uniform with no rank insignia. Her expression was empty of emotion. "This is Director Sarah Mitchell of Earth's High Command. You have 10 seconds to begin full retreat from human space. If any Velcrin vessel remains in our territory after that time, we will consider your entire species a valid military target. We're done being civilized." The transmission ended. Throck's mandibles clicked nervously. She's bluffing. Humans don't have the stomach for total war. 9 seconds later, he learned how wrong he was. The first human weapon to strike wasn't a missile or a beam cannon. It was something the Velcrin had never encountered. The forward section of Throck's flagship simply ceased to exist. Not exploded, not torn apart. It was there one moment and replaced with empty space the next. Molecular dissolution beams, the humans called them. Technology they'd developed and then banned from use against other civilized species. The ban was no longer in effect. Throck watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated around him. The human dreadnoughts moved with impossible precision, their targeting so accurate that every shot was a kill. No warning shots, no crippling blows designed to force surrender, just complete and total annihilation. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Thousands of Velcrin warriors died without ever having a chance to fight back. "Emergency jump," Throck screamed. "All ships emergency jump to Rally Point Keswick." His navigator's claws flew across the controls. The jump drive spooled up, reality bent, and the surviving ships lurched into faster-than-light travel. Throck slumped in his command throne, breathing hard. Out of 60 warships, only 32 had escaped. The humans had destroyed nearly half his fleet in under 3 minutes. Back in human space, Director Mitchell stood in the war room deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The chamber was carved from solid granite, lined with screens showing every theater of operation. Hundreds of officers worked at stations, coordinating the largest military operation in human history. Velcrin fleet has jumped out, reported Colonel Kevin Martinez. Tracking indicates they're heading for their nearest military base. Good, Mitchell said. Let them run. I want them scared. I want them to tell everyone what happens when you massacre human civilians. General Andrew Bishop approached her station. He was old enough to remember the Unification Wars, when Earth's nations finally put aside their differences. He'd been young then, just a lieutenant, but he'd seen enough bloodshed to last 10 lifetimes. Sarah, we need to talk about the endgame here. If we push too hard, the Galactic Council will intervene. Mitchell's laugh was bitter. The Galactic Council sat on their hands while the Velcrin murdered our people. They issued statements of concern. They called for restraint. They did nothing. She turned to face him.
We tried their way, Andrew. We followed their rules.
We were good little members of the galactic community, and our people died for it. So what's the plan? We wipe out the entire Velcrin species? No, we break them. We make an example that every other species in this galaxy will remember for the next 1,000 years. Humanity is not prey. We're not weak. We're not victims. And if you come for our people, we will end you. The Velcrin home system of Krath Prime was a fortress. 7 planets, each heavily defended, orbital platforms bristling with weapons, a fleet of 200 warships on permanent guard duty. It was supposed to be impregnable. The Velcrin leadership had retreated there after the initial human counterattack, confident that even enraged humans wouldn't dare assault their homeworld. They were wrong. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Parker led the stealth bomber wing that seeded the system with quantum mines. The devices were smaller than a human fist, nearly invisible to sensors, and each one packed enough antimatter to vaporize a small moon. Parker and her team placed 3,000 of them throughout the system in under 6 hours, then withdrew beyond detection range. Mines are active and networked, she reported. Waiting for your order, Director Mitchell. Mitchell stood before the main display. She could see the Velcrin homeworld, green and blue and beautiful. 2 billion Velcrin live there, civilians. Families. People who probably had no idea what their military had done to Colony 7. Status of evacuation broadcasts? She asked. Transmitted on all frequencies for the past 12 hours, answered Lieutenant Marcus Webb. We've warned them that their leadership has 24 hours to surrender unconditionally or face total system lockdown. No response so far. Mitchell nodded slowly. The plan wasn't to commit genocide. Humans didn't do that. But the Velcrin needed to understand that their leaders' choices had consequences. Real, terrifying consequences. The countdown clock hit 0. Still no surrender. Activate outer perimeter only, Mitchell ordered. Close the door, but don't go inside yet. The mines along the system's edge detonated in a carefully orchestrated sequence. The explosions created a field of debris and radiation that would make faster-than-light travel through that region impossible for months. The Velcrin home system was now a cage. Nothing in, nothing out. The entire species trapped inside while humanity decided their fate. Panic spread through the Velcrin government. Supreme Commander Vokath convened his war council in the Grand Chamber of the capital city. The assembled military leaders and politicians argued frantically about what to do next. We must fight, insisted General Krask. Gather every ship, every weapon, make the humans pay for every inch they advance. We already tried fighting them, Vokath snapped. We lost, badly. They destroyed our forces with contemptuous ease using weapons we didn't know they had. Then we surrender, suggested Counselor Mevith. Accept whatever terms they offer. And if their terms are our complete subjugation?
Our extinction?
The room fell silent. None of them knew what the humans truly wanted. The broadcasts had demanded unconditional surrender, but specified no terms beyond that. The uncertainty was perhaps the cruelest part. The humans had them trapped, helpless, waiting for a judgment that might never come. Mitchell watched the intelligence reports flow in. The Velcrin were fracturing. Some factions wanted to fight to the last, others begged for peace. Their economy was collapsing as trade routes closed. Food supplies were already running low on the outer colonies. The cage was working exactly as intended. How long do we wait? Bishop asked. As long as it takes, Mitchell replied. They need to understand that this situation exists entirely because of their choices. When they're ready to face real consequences, we'll talk. The Galactic Council finally convened an emergency session 3 days after humanity sealed the Velcrin home system. Ambassador Christina Wallace represented Earth. She arrived at the council station aboard a heavy cruiser with a full battle group and escort. The message was clear. Humanity was done showing up to these meetings as supplicants. The council chamber was a massive dome that could hold representatives from all 47 member species. Today, it was packed. Everyone wanted to see how the humans would justify their actions. The Velkrin delegate, a young male named Sorvik who'd been off-world when the lockdown happened, stood at his podium trembling with rage. "The humans have imprisoned my entire species," Sorvik shouted. 2 billion souls trapped in our home system. This is an act of war, a crime against galactic law, an atrocity that demands immediate action from this council. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Several species that had clashed with humanity before nodded vigorously. The humans had always been aggressive, too quick to resort to violence, too resistant to compromise. This seemed to confirm every prejudice. Christina waited for silence before speaking. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. 3 days ago, the Velkrin military destroyed Colony 7. They killed 300,000 human civilians in an unprovoked attack. Men, women, and children vaporized while they slept. Before that attack, there were 16 other incidents. Velkrin ships firing on unarmed human transports, raids on our frontier settlements, acts of piracy and murder that we documented, reported to this council, and begged you to address. She pulled up a holographic display. Images of the attacks played for everyone to see. Burning buildings, bodies. The last transmission from Colony 7 cutting off in a burst of static and screaming.
We followed your laws. We filed complaints.
We attended mediation sessions. We accepted compromises that required us to withdraw from systems we'd settled first. We did everything civilized species are supposed to do when faced with aggression. Christina's voice hardened. And our people kept dying. The Threkel representative, a massive insectoid named Clivix, clicked his mandibles dismissively. Your response is disproportionate. The Velkrin military committed crimes, yes. But you have threatened their entire civilization. We've threatened nothing, Christina replied. We've contained a hostile military power that demonstrated it cannot be trusted to operate in civilized space. The Velkrin home system is sealed but intact. No Velkrin civilians have been harmed. We've even continued to allow supply ships through the blockade to ensure humanitarian needs are met. Compare that to what they did to Colony 7. You cannot hold an entire species hostage, Sorvik screamed. This is collective punishment. It violates every principle this council stands for. Christina turned to face him directly. Where was this council when my people were being murdered? Where was this moral outrage when Velkrin warships hunted human freighters like animals? Where were the sanctions, the interventions, the peacekeeping forces? She let the questions hang in the air. You didn't care when humans died. You only care now because we stopped being victims. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species supported humanity's position. Others condemned it. The Heptari delegate proposed economic sanctions against Earth. The Zolkin ambassador suggested military intervention. It was chaos. Chancellor Brivik, the ancient being who led the council, finally called for order. His species lived for thousands of years and he'd seen countless wars. When he spoke, everyone listened. Ambassador Wallace, what are humanity's demands? What will it take for you to release the Velkrin from this blockade? Christina had been waiting for this question. First, the Velkrin military leadership responsible for the massacre will be extradited to Earth for trial. Second, the Velkrin government will pay full restitution to the families of every victim. Third, Velkrin forces will withdraw from all disputed territories and establish a demilitarized zone along our mutual border. Fourth, they will sign a non-aggression treaty with independent verification of compliance. And fifth, they will issue a formal apology acknowledging their crimes. These terms are impossible, Sorvik sputtered. Our leadership will never agree. Then your species can remain in their system until they learn to make better decisions, Christina said coldly. We can wait, can you? Back on Earth, the war was being fought on multiple fronts. The military engagement was only one part. Engineers worked around the clock to produce more weapons, more ships, more of everything needed to sustain a conflict. Scientists developed new technologies, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And ordinary citizens rallied behind the cause with a unity Earth hadn't seen in generations. Private Jake Sanders was one of millions who volunteered for service after Colony 7. He'd been studying architecture, planning to design sustainable habitats for new colony worlds. Now he was in basic training, learning how to operate powered armor and plasma rifles. Why'd you sign up? Asked his bunkmate, a woman named Claire Robinson. My cousin lived on Colony 7, Jake said quietly. She was 8 years old, loved to draw pictures of spaceships and aliens. She thought the universe was full of friends we just hadn't met yet. He checked the charge on his rifle. Turns out she was wrong. And I'm going to make sure no other kid has to learn that lesson the way she did. She understood. Everyone in their unit had similar stories. The massacre had touched every community on Earth. It wasn't just a distant tragedy. It was personal, and that made all the difference. In the Velkran home system, the situation grew more desperate by the day. Supply convoys could bring in food and medicine, but the economic isolation was devastating.
Financial markets collapsed.
Unemployment skyrocketed as businesses dependent on interstellar commerce went bankrupt. The population was fed and housed, but the future looked increasingly bleak. Supreme Commander Vokath met with his inner circle in a secure bunker. They'd been discussing the human demands for hours, going in circles. If we accept their terms, we admit guilt, General Krask argued. Our honor demands we fight. Our honor means nothing if our entire civilization starves, countered Counselor Mevith. Be realistic, Krask. We're beaten. The humans have us in a position where we can't fight, can't flee, and can't survive long-term without concessions. Vokath stared at the strategic display. The human blockade was perfect. They'd positioned their forces with mathematical precision, covering every possible escape route. More ships arrived daily, reinforcing positions that were already unbreakable. The humans were settling in for a long siege, and they clearly had the resources to maintain it indefinitely. I authorized the attack on Colony 7, Vokath said quietly. I believed humans were weak, that they would protest and negotiate and eventually accept our dominance in the disputed sectors. I was catastrophically wrong. The admission shocked everyone in the room. Velkran leaders never acknowledged mistakes so directly. The humans aren't like other species we've encountered, Vokath continued. They don't posture. They don't make empty threats. When they say they're done being civilized, they mean it literally. They've shown us weapons that violate a dozen galactic treaties, technology they built and chose not to use until we pushed them past breaking point. We're not facing a weak prey species. We're facing predators who learned to play nice and forgot we never should have mistaken that for inability. So we surrender? Krask's voice was hollow. We accept reality, Vokath said, and we pray the humans are merciful enough to let us survive it. The surrender negotiations took place aboard a neutral station in the border region. Director Mitchell led the human delegation. Vokath represented the Velkran personally. The first meeting was tense, both leaders sizing each other up across a conference table. You understand that accepting our terms means fundamental changes to your government and military, Mitchell said. This isn't just about paying compensation. You need to demonstrate that the thinking that led to Colony 7 will never happen again. Vokath's mandibles clicked slowly. You're asking us to fundamentally restructure our entire society. I'm asking you to evolve. Join the actual civilized galaxy instead of pretending to be part of it while you murder anyone weaker than you. Mitchell leaned forward. Your species has potential. You're skilled engineers, accomplished scientists. But you're also violent, arrogant, and you've spent the last century bullying smaller civilizations because you could. That ends now. And if we refuse, Mitchell didn't blink, then you sit in your home system until your economy completely collapses, your government falls apart, and your people descend into civil war over the scraps. We can maintain the blockade for decades if necessary. Can your civilization survive that long in isolation? The brutality of the assessment made Vokath flinch. You would doom billions to suffering for the crimes of our leadership? No. Your leadership would doom billions by refusing to take responsibility for their crimes. Don't project your choices onto us. We're giving you a path forward. Whether you take it is up to you. The negotiations continued for 2 weeks. Every detail was hammered out. The Velkran military would be reduced by 60%. All weapons that violated galactic treaties would be dismantled, and the scientists who developed them would face trial. The disputed territories would be placed under neutral administration for 10 years before final status was determined, and yes, the leadership responsible for the massacre would be extradited. The hardest moment came when Vokath realized he was on that list. I'll go, he said quietly during a private session. If my trial and punishment will satisfy human justice and allow my species to move forward, I'll go willingly. Mitchell studied him carefully. This isn't about revenge, Commander. It's about accountability. What happened to Colony 7 can never happen again. Not by your species, not by any species. If other civilizations see that you face real consequences, they'll think twice before testing our patience. Will I be executed? That's for a court to decide. But I'll tell you this much. Humans understand the difference between those who give orders and those who follow them. We're not interested in punishing Velcran civilians or low-level soldiers who were just doing what they were told. We want the people who made the decision to murder 300,000 innocents. You are one of them. Vokath nodded slowly. Then I'll face your justice. I only ask that you honor your agreement. Once the terms are met, release my people from the blockade. They don't deserve to suffer for my mistakes. The treaty was signed in a formal ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. Vokath and 6 other Velcran commanders walked onto human ships in shackles. The images were stark and undeniable. The mighty Velcran military reduced to prisoners. Some species watching felt satisfaction. Others felt fear. Everyone learned the same lesson. Humans were not to be trifled with. As the blockade dissolved and Velcran ships began leaving their home system, Director Mitchell received a private communication from Chancellor Brevok. You've made your point, Director. Perhaps too effectively. Half the Galactic Council now views humanity as the greatest threat in known space. Mitchell smiled without humor. Good. Let them be afraid. Fear might teach them something diplomacy never could. And what happens when that fear turns to hostility? When multiple species decide humanity is too dangerous to coexist with? Then they'll learn what the Velcran learned. We don't want war. We'll try every peaceful option first. But if you back us into a corner, if you make us choose between being civilized and protecting our people, we'll choose our people every single time, and we're very, very good at war when we stop holding back. Brevok was silent for a long moment. I hope for all our sakes that this message is heard and heeded, because I fear what happens if anyone tests it again. The trial of the Velcran commanders lasted 6 months. It was held on Earth, in the reconstructed city of Geneva, where ancient humans had once tried to establish international law. The proceedings were broadcast live across the galaxy. Millions of beings watched as evidence was presented, witnesses testified, and the accused were given every opportunity to defend themselves. Prosecutor Amanda Foster presented the case against Vokath personally. She was calm, methodical, devastating. She showed the attack plans, the communications proving the strike on Colony 7 was deliberate, the intelligence reports that confirmed the Velcran knew they were targeting civilians. There was no ambiguity, no room for interpretation. The defense will claim this was a military necessity, Foster told the judges. They'll argue that Colony 7 was strategically important, that civilian casualties were regrettable but unavoidable. Don't believe them. We have their own records. They chose that target specifically because they thought killing human families would break our will to resist. They wanted to terrorize us into submission. Instead, they learned what happens when you confuse restraint with weakness. Vokath's defense attorney, ironically a human named Gregory Scott, did his best. He argued that Vokath was operating under outdated intelligence that suggested humans would accept such losses. He claimed the Velcran didn't understand human psychology, didn't realize how such an attack would be perceived. It was a weak defense, and everyone knew it. When Vokath took the stand, he surprised everyone by refusing to hide behind justifications. I ordered the attack, he said clearly. I believed humans were soft, that they'd negotiated in the past because they lacked the courage to fight. I thought destroying one colony would make them back down from the disputed territories. I was wrong about everything. I underestimated your species completely, and 300,000 innocents died because of my arrogance and stupidity. Do you feel remorse? Asked Judge Patricia Williams. Vokath's mandibles trembled. I feel many things, Judge. Remorse is among them. But remorse doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't undo what I've done. I'm not asking for mercy. I'm simply stating facts. I'm guilty. I deserve whatever punishment you deem appropriate. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The sentence was life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Vokath and his co-defendants would spend the rest of their lives in a secure facility, living examples of what happened to those who committed atrocities against humanity. But the trial was never just about punishment. It was about sending a message, and that message was received. 6 months after the verdict, Ambassador Christina Wallace addressed the Galactic Council again. The chamber was quieter this time, more respectful. The casual dismissiveness that had characterized previous interactions with human representatives was gone. The Velcran situation is resolved, Christina announced. Their government has complied with all treaty requirements. Their military has been restructured. The war criminals have been punished. The demilitarized zone is established and being monitored by neutral observers. We consider the matter closed. Chancellor Brevok nodded. The Council acknowledges humanity's restraint in this matter. Many feared you would pursue total war against the Velcrin species. Instead, you demonstrated measured force in service of justice. We are not monsters, Christina replied. We never wanted to be the scary species everyone fears. We wanted to be good neighbors, productive members of the galactic community, partners in building a better future. But we will not accept being victims. Any species that targets human civilians will face consequences. Not because we're cruel, because we love our people enough to protect them, whatever the cost. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of worlds. Some of you are afraid of us now. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Fear can be a teacher. It can remind you to think twice, to consider consequences, to choose diplomacy over violence. We're still willing to be your friends, your trading partners, your allies. But we won't be your prey. Not ever again. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The military remained on high alert, but the immediate crisis had passed. Jake Sanders completed his training and was assigned to a patrol cruiser protecting the border zones. Claire Robinson became a combat medic, saving lives instead of taking them. Private citizens like them represented the new reality. Humanity was armed, watchful, and ready. Director Mitchell retired from active service 6 months after the trial ended. She'd done what was necessary, made the hard calls, carried the weight of decisions that would haunt her forever. Now she wanted peace. She moved to a quiet colony world, far from Earth, and spent her days teaching history at a small university. The final lecture of each semester always covered the same topic, Colony 7 and its aftermath. Some will tell you what we did was wrong, she told her students, young humans and aliens alike. They'll say we overreacted, that we could have found a peaceful solution. Maybe they're right. Maybe if we'd been more patient, more willing to absorb losses, eventually the Velcrin would have stopped on their own. But that's easy to say when it's not your family being murdered, when it's not your children burning, when it's not your species being hunted. She paused, letting the words sink in. What happened to Colony 7 changed humanity. It reminded us that the universe isn't safe just because we want it to be, that evil exists and sometimes must be confronted with force. We tried being civilized. We followed every rule, trusted every process, believed that reason and law would protect us. We were wrong. And when those systems failed, we had to fall back on something older, something primal. The absolute refusal to let our people be slaughtered without consequence. A student raised her hand. Do you think we did the right thing, Professor? Mitchell considered the question carefully. I think we did what was necessary. Whether it was right, history will judge. But I know this. No human colony has been attacked since. The disputed territories are at peace, and every species in the galaxy now understands that humans are not victims. We're survivors. We're protectors. And if you come for our people, we're your worst nightmare. That knowledge has kept the peace for 5 years now. Maybe it will keep it for 500 more. The class ended. Students filed out, some thoughtful, others troubled. Mitchell stayed behind, looking out the window at the alien sun setting over unfamiliar mountains. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness of space, humanity's message was still being heard, still being remembered. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and Earth was finally safe to be civilized again.